The jade pendant, warmed by my skin, offered a chilling echo of the icy palace floor against my cheek. In this life, its weight feels different, less a symbol of status, more like a stone dragged from a frozen lake, heavy with the stolen memories of a past life. They call me Consort May now, a favored concubine adorned in silks and showered with trinkets. Yet, beneath the lacquer and rouge, the ghost of my former self lingers, whispering of betrayal and a shallow grave. They thought they had silenced me, the Empress, with her serene smile and viper's heart, my own sister, who coveted my position and the Emperor's fleeting affections. They believed death was an ending, a clean severing of threads. Fools! Death is merely a doorway, and I have returned armed with the knowledge of their treachery, the taste of ashes on my tongue, and a chilling resolve that even the deepest winter cannot extinguish. The court is a stage, each player masked in smiles and veiled intentions. I see through them now. The Emperor, blinded by vanity, dances like a puppet to the tune of ambition. The ministers, their loyalties as fluid as the Yangtze River, ever seeking the strongest current. And my sister, oh, my sister. She basks in the Emperor's favor, unaware that the hand she holds so possessively is marked for ruin. Revenge is a slow poison, brewed in the cauldron of memory. It consumes from within, staining the soul with its bitter essence. I know this, yet I cannot turn away. Their cruelty has carved a path through my heart, and only retribution can fill the void. I will dismantle their world, brick by agonizing brick. I will use their own weapons against them, whispers in darkened corridors, alliances forged in secret, and the subtle art of manipulation perfected over lifetimes. Let them believe me a doll, a plaything to be admired and discarded. Let them underestimate the storm gathering behind these painted lips. For when the thunder breaks, it will shatter their gilded cage, leaving them drowning in the wreckage of their deceit. This I vow upon the memory of my past life and the burning promise of my vengeance. But vengeance is a serpent, coiled tight around the heart, its venom promising release, but delivering only a slow, agonizing burn. I knew this, intellectually, from the sterile textbooks of my former life. Yet, here in the suffocating embrace of the ancient court, reason is a forgotten language. Each silken gown, each obsequious bow, is a fresh insult, a reminder of the life stolen, the future denied. They see a sung-fi, favored and foolish. They do not see the ghost that haunts her eyes, the steel that has replaced her heart. Let them revel in their ignorance. Let them believe that power resides in jade ornaments and embroidered robes. My power is of a different kind, the cold, unwavering knowledge of what is to come. The Emperor, a man whose touch feels like a brand, whose gaze holds the weight of empires, remains an enigma. Is he a pawn in their game, or its architect? Time, the great revealer, will tell. Until then, I will play my part, a delicate flower blooming amidst thorns, concealing the viper within. The nights are the hardest. Sleep offers no escape, only a relentless replay of past horrors. The faces of my betrayers swim before me, their triumphant smiles mocking my helplessness. It is then, in the solitude of my chambers, that I wrestle with the serpent of vengeance, its hiss a constant temptation. Will I become the monster they believe me to be? Will I sacrifice my soul for the fleeting satisfaction of revenge? The answer, I know, lies not in blind retribution, but in calculated justice. To dismantle their web of deceit, I need allies, information, and above all, control. I will use their own weapons against them, their ambition, their greed, their insatiable hunger for power. And when the time is right, I will expose them for the vipers they truly are, not for the sake of revenge, but to reclaim the life that was stolen from me. To build a future where innocence can flourish and justice will prevail. Even in this gilded cage, I will find a way to soar. Vengeance, like a viper coiled in the heart, demands constant feeding. It whispers promises of satisfaction, yet delivers only ashes and regret. The faces of my betrayers haunt my waking hours, their laughter echoing in the silence of my chambers. How easily they cast me aside, like a broken doll, their ambition blinding them to the consequences of their cruelty. Yet I refuse to be consumed by bitterness. I will not allow their darkness to extinguish the embers of hope that still flicker within me. My rebirth is not merely an opportunity for retribution, but a chance to forge a new destiny, one where love and loyalty are not commodities to be bartered, but virtues to be cherished. I must tread carefully, for the court is a treacherous labyrinth of hidden agendas and unspoken desires. Each smile may conceal a dagger, each whispered word a carefully laid trap. But I am no longer the naive girl who arrived at these palace gates, full of dreams and innocence. I have tasted the bitter fruit of betrayal, and it has awakened within me a cunning and resilience I never knew I possessed. I will study my enemies, learn their weaknesses, and exploit their flaws. I will weave a web of alliances, gathering those who have been wronged, those who seek justice, those who yearn for a better world. And when the time is right, we will rise together, not as instruments of vengeance, but as architects of a new era, where compassion triumphs over cruelty, and integrity reigns supreme. Vengeance, like a venomous serpent, coils tightly around the heart, threatening to suffocate the very virtues it seeks to defend. I must tread carefully, lest I become the monster I swore to destroy. The line between justice and revenge is as thin as the silken thread that binds a butterfly's wings, and one wrong step could shatter the delicate balance of my soul. The court is a viper's nest, a labyrinth of deceit and treachery where smiles mask daggers and whispers carry the weight of life and death. Each courtier, each concubine, each eunuch is a player in this deadly game, their motives shrouded in secrecy, their allegiances as fickle as the wind. To navigate this treacherous terrain, I must become a master of disguise, a chameleon blending seamlessly into the ever-shifting landscape of the palace. I will observe, I will listen, I will learn. I will uncover the hidden agendas, the secret alliances, the unspoken desires that drive these individuals. I will use their weaknesses against them, turning their own machinations into their undoing. But I will not succumb to the darkness that consumes them. I will not allow their cruelty to taint my spirit. I will remain true to the principles of compassion and integrity, even as I walk through the valley of shadows. For I know that true victory lies not in the destruction of my enemies, but in the transformation of their hearts in the creation of a world where such cruelty and injustice are no longer tolerated, where empathy and understanding prevail. And that is the legacy I will leave behind, a legacy of hope, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of adversities. But the path to such a world, I knew, was paved with the very stones of vengeance I had sworn to dismantle. How could I preach forgiveness when the echoes of their treachery still reverberated in my soul, when the faces of the innocent, their lives stolen by ambition and greed, haunted my waking hours? The conflict tore at me, a tempest raging within. Was I merely deluding myself, clinging to an ideal that could never take root in the poisoned soil of this court? Each day was a battle, a relentless dance between the woman I aspired to be the enlightened ruler who sought to heal and unite, and the vengeful spirit that yearned to unleash the full fury of my intellect and power upon those who deserved it. Sleep offered no respite, only visions of past lives, of betrayals and injustices so profound they threatened to consume me entirely. I saw myself as the wronged concubine, stripped of dignity and cast aside. I felt the sting of the lash, the gnawing hunger of neglect, the crushing weight of despair, and with each vision, the desire for retribution grew stronger, more insistent, a venomous serpent coiling around my heart. Yet, amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope remained. I remembered the faces of those who had shown me kindness, those who had risked their own lives to protect the innocent. Their courage, their unwavering belief in the possibility of good, served as a beacon, guiding me through the treacherous currents of my own anger. I realized that true strength lay not in succumbing to the darkness, but in harnessing it, in channeling it towards a greater purpose. I would not let their cruelty define me. I would not become the monster they wanted me to be. Instead, I would use their wickedness as a catalyst for change, transforming their poison into medicine, their hatred into love. And so I walked on, a solitary figure amidst a sea of treachery, armed with nothing but my wits, my compassion, and an unwavering determination to create a better world. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but I knew, deep in my heart, that it was the only path worth taking. For in the end, it is not the darkness that defines us, but the light we choose to carry within ourselves. But even as I embraced this path of righteousness, the ghosts of my past clung to me like shadows, whispering insidious temptations in my ear. The faces of those who had wronged me flickered in my mind's eye: the Emperor, whose callous ambition had snuffed out my love; the Empress, whose venomous jealousy had poisoned my life; the concubines, whose petty rivalries had woven a web of deceit that ensnared me. Their sins were etched into my very soul, a constant reminder of the injustice I had suffered. And so a battle raged within me, a conflict between the desire for vengeance and the yearning for redemption. Could I truly transcend the cycle of hatred, or was I destined to become a mirror image of those who had tormented me? Was it possible to forgive such profound betrayals, or would the embers of resentment forever smoulder in my heart? I sought answers in the ancient texts, poring over tales of karma and reincarnation, of justice and retribution. I consulted with wise monks and learned scholars, seeking guidance on how to reconcile my thirst for revenge with my commitment to compassion. Some urged me to embrace forgiveness, arguing that only by releasing the pain of the past could I truly find peace. Others insisted that justice demanded retribution, that those who had inflicted suffering deserved to be punished for their crimes. As I grappled with these conflicting philosophies, I began to realize that the path to true justice was not so simple as an eye for an eye. Revenge, I understood, was a dangerous and seductive illusion, a fleeting moment of satisfaction that ultimately left a bitter taste in its wake. It was a poison that consumed both the victim and the perpetrator, perpetuating a cycle of violence that knew no end. No, the true path to justice lay not in retribution, but in transformation. It was not enough to punish the guilty. I had to dismantle the very systems that had allowed their wickedness to flourish. I had to heal the wounds of the past, not by inflicting new ones, but by creating a future where such atrocities could never happen again. And so I resolved to walk a different path, a path of forgiveness, of compassion, and of unwavering determination to create a better world. It would not be easy. The allure of revenge would continue to tempt me, and the ghosts of my past would continue to haunt me. But I knew that I could not allow myself to succumb to the darkness. For in the end, it is not the darkness that defines us, but the light we choose to carry within ourselves. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Just as I began to find solace in my newfound purpose, a searing pain ripped through my soul. It was not the physical agony of my past wounds, but something far more profound, a cosmic upheaval that shattered the very foundations of my being. One moment, I stood on the precipice of a future bathed in the warm glow of redemption. The next, I was hurtling through the infinite void, a disembodied consciousness adrift in the swirling chaos of time and space. I was no longer May, the woman who had suffered unspeakable horrors and emerged from the ashes with a heart full of forgiveness. I was someone else, someone new, yet inextricably bound to the echoes of my past life. I awoke in a world both familiar and alien. The silken sheets beneath me, the ornate carvings on the lacquered furniture, the hushed whispers of servants just beyond the door, all spoke of a life of privilege and power. But there was a darkness lurking beneath the surface, a palpable sense of unease that sent shivers down my spine. I was no longer a humble peasant seeking solace in compassion. I was now a favoured concubine in the imperial court, a viper's nest of intrigue and betrayal where smiles hid daggers and whispered words could shatter empires. The memories flooded back in fragmented waves, each one a searing brand upon my soul. I remembered the opulent palace, the treacherous courtiers, and the cold-blooded emperor who held my life in his hands. I remembered the petty jealousies, the ruthless power plays, and the countless injustices that festered within those gilded walls. And most of all, I remembered the faces of those who had wronged me, their eyes filled with malice and their hearts devoid of mercy. The woman whose body I now inhabited, Consort, had been a pawn in their game, a naive and trusting soul who had been devoured by the wolves in sheet clothing. She had been betrayed, humiliated, and ultimately discarded, her life extinguished like a flickering candle in the wind. And as I delved deeper into her memories, I felt a burning rage ignite within me, a rage that threatened to consume everything in its path. The path of forgiveness I had so carefully chosen in my previous life now seemed like a distant dream, a naive fantasy shattered by the harsh realities of this new existence. How could I preach compassion to those who reveled in cruelty? How could I offer redemption to those who had shown no mercy? The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw the world for what it truly was, a brutal battleground where only the strong survived. And so I made a vow not to forgive, not to forget, but to avenge. I would use every weapon at my disposal, my beauty, my wit, and my newfound knowledge of the court's inner workings, to dismantle the lives of those who had wronged Consort. I would become the viper in their midst, the silent assassin who struck from the shadows, and the architect of their downfall. The game had changed, and so had I. The gentle lamb had been replaced by a vengeful she-wolf, and the hunt had just begun. But vengeance, I would soon discover, is a dish best served searing hot, its flames licking at the edges of my very soul. The whispers of the dead echoed in the halls of my mind, fueling a fire that threatened to consume me whole. Each calculated move, each carefully spun lie, chipped away at the woman I once was, replacing her with a creature forged in the crucible of hatred. The faces of my enemies swam before my eyes, the Empress, with her cold, calculating gaze, the treacherous Consort May, whose honeyed words concealed a heart of venom, and the Emperor himself, whose blind ambition had paved the road to my demise. They would all pay, each in their own way, for the suffering they inflicted. Yet, even as I plotted their downfall, a disquieting truth began to dawn within me. Was this revenge truly worth the price? Was I not becoming the very monster I sought to destroy? The memories of my past life, fragmented and fleeting, offered glimpses of a different path, a path of compassion, of forgiveness, of letting go. But those memories were drowned out by the roaring tide of my rage, a tempest that threatened to drag me under. The court was a viper's nest, a labyrinth of deceit and treachery, where every smile was a mask and every word a weapon. Navigating its treacherous currents required a cunning I never knew I possessed, a ruthlessness that chilled me to the bone. I learned to play the game, to manipulate and deceive, to weave a web of intrigue that ensnared my enemies. But with each victory, a hollowness grew within me, a sense of emptiness that no amount of revenge could fill. The faces of those I had wronged haunted my dreams, their silent accusations echoing in the darkness. Was I truly any better than them? Had I not become the very embodiment of the evil I sought to eradicate? The line between justice and vengeance blurred, and I found myself teetering on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether I was saving myself or condemning myself to an eternity of darkness. The path of revenge was seductive, promising satisfaction and closure, but it was also treacherous, leading to a moral abyss from which there might be no return. And as I stood on that precipice, I knew that the choice I made would determine not only my fate, but the fate of all those caught in the web of my making. I was but a leaf caught in a storm, driven by forces I barely comprehended. The whispers of my past life, the echoes of betrayal and pain, clawed at my soul, demanding retribution. Yet I was no longer the woman I once was. I carried within me the knowledge of another world, a world where justice was not bartered in gilded cages, but fought for in the light of reason and equality. The science of what I remembered as my future spoke of memories passed down through generations, of trauma etched into the very fabric of our being. Could it be that the agony I endured, the injustice I suffered, was not merely a ghost haunting my mind, but a tangible force, shaping my very essence? Perhaps this explained the burning rage that threatened to consume me, the insatiable hunger for vengeance that gnawed at my insides. But I also remembered the lessons of that other life, the understanding that revenge was a hollow victory, a fleeting pleasure that left behind a bitter aftertaste. I had seen the ruins of what I remembered as my modern world, and I knew retribution was a poison that spread through generations. Here, in the heart of the Tang dynasty, where power was a game played with lives and souls, I was torn between two worlds, two sets of values. The ancient court, with its intricate web of social classes, its ruthless power struggles, and its deeply ingrained patriarchy, clashed with the ideals of equality, justice, and individual freedom that I believed I brought with me from what I remembered as the future. I saw the faces of those who wronged me in my past life, their arrogance and cruelty etched into their features. The Emperor, with his fickle affections and his absolute power, the Empress, with her cold ambition and her venomous tongue, the concubines, each vying for a scrap of favor, willing to betray and destroy anyone who stood in their way. They were all players in this deadly game, and I was now a piece on their board. But I was no longer a pawn to be sacrificed. I had tasted the knowledge of another life, and I refused to be bound by the chains of this one. I would use their own weapons against them. I would exploit their weaknesses, manipulate their desires, and turn their intrigues against themselves. But as I plotted my revenge, I had to remember the lessons of my past. I must not become the monster I sought to destroy. The path ahead was fraught with peril. One wrong step, one moment of weakness, and I could lose everything, my life, my freedom, my very soul. But I could not turn back. I had come too far, suffered too much. I would navigate this treacherous court, I would expose their lies, and I would claim the justice that was denied to me in my past life. But as I embarked on this journey of vengeance, I had to constantly ask myself, was I seeking justice, or was I simply seeking to inflict pain? Was I trying to heal the wounds of the past, or was I merely perpetuating a cycle of violence and hatred? The answers to these questions would determine not only my fate, but the fate of all those who crossed my path. The weight of these questions was a heavy burden, one that threatened to crush me beneath its immensity. I was but a single soul, thrust back into the vortex of a court teeming with vipers, a place where smiles, concealed daggers and whispers carried more weight than decrees. I had to tread carefully, for one misstep could plunge me into an abyss from which there was no return. Yet, even as I acknowledged the precariousness of my position, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. They had taken everything from me in my past life, my family, my dignity, my very right to exist. They reveled in my suffering, their laughter echoing in the halls as I was dragged to my doom. Now they would pay the price for their cruelty. I would use their own weapons against them, turning their machinations and betrayals into instruments of their downfall. But how far was I willing to go? How much of my soul was I willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of vengeance? Could I remain true to myself, or would I become the very monster I sought to destroy? The line between justice and revenge was often blurred, especially when viewed through the lens of a shattered past. I must not allow my pain to consume me, to transform me into a creature devoid of empathy and compassion. For if I did, then I would have lost the very essence of what makes me human. I was not merely seeking to punish those who wronged me, I was seeking to break the cycle of hatred and violence that had plagued this court for far too long. I wanted to create a world where justice prevailed, where the innocent were protected, and where the guilty were held accountable for their actions. But to achieve this noble goal, I must first confront the darkness within myself, the rage and bitterness that threatened to consume me. I must find a way to channel my pain into a force for good, to use my knowledge of the past to build a better future. This was my vow, my solemn promise to myself and to the memory of those I loved and lost. I would not rest until justice was served, but I would also not allow myself to become a monster in the process. I would walk this treacherous path with my head held high and my heart open, guided by the principles of compassion and integrity. For in the end, it is not the vengeance I seek that will define me, but the choices I make along the way. The path to redemption is rarely paved with ease. The whispers of my past life clung to me like shadows, twisting my thoughts and fueling my desires. Sleep offered no escape, only vivid replays of betrayal and loss. The faces of those who wronged me flickered in the darkness, their cruel smiles a constant torment. I found myself wrestling with the very nature of revenge. Was it a righteous act, a necessary evil to restore balance? Or was it a corrosive poison that consumed the soul, leaving behind only bitterness and regret? The ancient texts spoke of karma, of the universe's intricate dance of cause and effect. But what solace could karma offer when the wounds were still fresh, the pain still searing? My modern sensibilities clashed with the brutal realities of this ancient world. In my previous life, I believed in justice, in due process, in the power of reason and empathy. But here, in the heart of the Tang dynasty, power was a game played with ruthless cunning, and mercy was often mistaken for weakness. I saw the echoes of my past reflected in the lives of those around me. The court was a viper's nest of intrigue, where concubines vied for the emperor's favor, their every smile and gesture a calculated move in a deadly game. The eunuchs, with their silent power and inscrutable motives, were a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the corrupting influence of ambition. And then there were the whispers of reincarnation, the ancient belief that the soul is reborn, carrying with it the memories and karmic debts of past lives. Could the whispers be true? Could this life be more than just a cruel twist of fate, but a chance to right the wrongs of the past, to break the cycle of violence and suffering? The Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia has been researching this phenomenon for decades, meticulously documenting cases of children who spontaneously recall past lives. They approach the subject with scientific rigor, seeking verifiable facts to support their claims. And yet, even with their meticulous research, the mystery of reincarnation remains elusive, a tantalizing glimpse into the unknown. Perhaps the answer lies not in science, but in the depths of the human heart. Perhaps the memories of past lives are not merely echoes of forgotten experiences, but a source of wisdom and guidance, a reminder of the choices we have made and the paths we have yet to tread. I knew that indulging in revenge fantasies would only lead to more suffering. Trauma can generate unresolved anger, bitterness, and a desire for control, potentially leading to harmful behavior. Vengeful thoughts can prolong negative emotional states, contributing to negative feelings and ruminations. A revenge mindset can hijack neural pathways, flooding the system with stress hormones and shutting down rational thinking. But how could I resist the urge to retaliate when the injustice was so blatant, the pain so profound? How could I forgive those who had caused me so much suffering? The answer, I suspected, lay in understanding the nature of trauma itself. Traumatic events can shatter a person's sense of safety and identity, leading to identity fragmentation. To heal, I must reclaim my identity, not as a victim of the past, but as a warrior of the present, determined to shape my own destiny. I would not let the past define me. I would use my knowledge to build a better world, a world where compassion and justice prevail over cruelty and oppression. This was my new vow, my new purpose, and I would not rest until it was fulfilled. But how could I reconcile the fractured pieces of myself? I was a modern woman thrust into an ancient world, a scholar now a pawn in a deadly game of courtly intrigue, a victim reborn with the power to fight back. The Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, with its research into reincarnation, felt like a distant echo of a truth I now embodied. Their findings on trauma, the disruption of the brain's networks, the changes in the amygdala and hippocampus were not abstract concepts, but the very architecture of my shattered mind. The anger that threatened to consume me was a neural pathway etched deep within my being. The desire for revenge, the craving for justice, the nucleus accumbens fired with each vengeful thought. Yet I knew that succumbing to this rage would only perpetuate the cycle of violence. The oxytocin-fueled empathy that binds people together could so easily twist into a weapon, a justification for cruelty against those deemed other. I remembered the science of memory, the way the brain constantly reconstructs and updates experiences. My past life, the one I lived in the 21st century, was not a fixed, immutable truth. It was a narrative, a story I could reshape, reframe, and ultimately use to guide my actions in this new reality. The key, I realized, was integration, to weave together the disparate threads of my identity, to forge a coherent self from the fragments of past and present. Like those with complex dissociative disorders finding a path to wholeness, I, too, could reclaim my narrative, crafting an empowering account of my life. This was not merely about survival, but about transformation, using the knowledge of my past to build a future free from the tyranny of ignorance and cruelty. It was about becoming more than just a Sung Fi Tai Sin, a favored concubine reborn. It was about becoming a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. And I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within my soul, that the journey ahead, though fraught with peril, was one I was destined to undertake. The path to that future was not paved with ease. The memories of my past life, the trauma of betrayal and death, were not mere spectres haunting my dreams. They were etched into the very fabric of my being. The Division of Perceptual Studies at the University of Virginia, with its focus on reincarnation and the mysteries of memory, would potentially find a fascinating subject in me, should they choose to study my case. For I was a living testament to the enduring power of the past, a vessel carrying the echoes of a life lived and lost. The science of memory, with its intricate understanding of how the brain consolidates and reconstructs experience, offered a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. Perhaps, through understanding the neural pathways of anger and revenge, I could learn to navigate the treacherous currents of courtly intrigue without succumbing to the destructive impulses that consumed me in my previous life. Perhaps I could heal the fragmentation of my identity, piecing together the shattered remnants of myself into a coherent whole. Yet the trauma remained, a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the depths of human cruelty. The changes wrought upon my brain by the horrors I endured were not easily undone. The disrupted neural networks, the heightened stress responses, these were the scars of a past that refused to be forgotten. But I would not let them define me. I would not allow the darkness to consume me. Instead, I would use my pain as a catalyst for growth, transforming my trauma into strength. The journey ahead would be a battle against not only external enemies, but also the demons within. It would require me to confront my own vulnerabilities, to acknowledge my fears, and to embrace the power of forgiveness. For only by healing myself could I hope to heal the world around me. And so I embarked on this perilous quest, armed with the knowledge of the past, the wisdom of the present, and an unwavering determination to create a future worthy of the sacrifices I had made. The Sung Fi Tai Sin was not just a title, it was a destiny, a calling to rise above the ashes of my former life and become something more. The weight of such a transformation, the Sung Fi Tai Sin, settled upon me like a shroud, heavy with the echoes of lives lived and lost. It was a burden I must bear, a destiny I could not escape. The whispers of the past, once a torment, now served as a map, guiding me through the labyrinth of courtly intrigue and treacherous alliances. But what of my mind fragmented by the collision of centuries? How could I reconcile the pragmatic cynicism of my former existence with the opulent, yet perilous, world into which I had been thrust? The division of perceptual studies spoke of memory and trauma, of neural pathways forged in the crucible of experience. They sought to understand the very phenomenon that had shattered my reality, the inexplicable recall of a life not my own. Did they know the terror of reliving another's pain, the phantom ache of wounds suffered in a bygone era? The memories flooded my senses, the silken touch of imperial robes, the glint of steel in the shadows, the sting of betrayal. They were not mere recollections, they were visceral experiences, etched into the very fabric of my being. And what of revenge? Researchers spoke of oxytocin and the nucleus accumbens, of the neural circuitry that fueled our darkest desires. In this ancient court, revenge was not a clinical study, it was a way of life. Every smile concealed a dagger, every whispered word a potential death sentence. The urge to retaliate, to avenge the injustices suffered by an intuit, burned within me like a fever. But could I succumb to such base instincts without losing myself entirely? Could I navigate this treacherous path without becoming the very monster I sought to destroy? My identity, once so firmly rooted in the soil of the modern world, now felt like shifting sand beneath my feet. Researchers spoke of identity fragmentation, of a diminished sense of self. I understood this all too well. I was no longer just me, nor was I entirely intuit. I was a fractured mosaic, a kaleidoscope of conflicting desires and memories. The challenge lay in piecing myself back together, in forging a new identity that honored the past without being consumed by it. Perhaps, as some researchers suggested, a coherent narrative was the key to recovery. Perhaps by weaving together the threads of my two lives, I could create a tapestry of strength and resilience. But the loom was fragile, the colors bled, and the pattern remained elusive. The Sum Phi Tysin was not merely a second chance, it was a crucible in which I must either be reforged or shattered completely. The stakes were higher than ever, for the fate of an empire, and the salvation of my soul hung in the balance. The weight of 2 lifetimes bore down on me, a crushing burden of memory and expectation. The whispers of modern neuroscience, the intricate dance of oxytocin and amygdala were faint echoes against the roar of ancient courtly intrigue. How could I reconcile the cold, clinical understanding of trauma with the burning, visceral need for retribution that consumed me? Scientists speak of resilience, of the brain's capacity to rewire itself, to forge new pathways in the face of adversity. But what of the spirit? Could the soul, fractured by betrayal and reborn in vengeance, ever truly heal? Narrative therapy, they say, can rewrite the scripts of the self. But what script could encompass the impossible chasm between a life lived in the sterile halls of a research lab and one steeped in the perfumed poison of the imperial court? I was Temuin Kai, and yet I was not. The memories of another life, another self, clung to me like a second skin, chafing and constricting. This Sum Phi Tysin demanded I embody a role, a destiny, that felt both alien and terrifyingly familiar. The world around me pulsed with danger, with the ever-present threat of discovery, of exposure. Each smile, each gesture, each carefully chosen word was a calculated risk, a gamble against the treacherous currents of fate. And yet, within the chaos, a flicker of hope remained. Perhaps, just perhaps, by embracing the duality of my existence, by weaving together the threads of science and instinct, I could forge a new identity, one that transcends the limitations of both worlds. But the path is fraught with peril, and the price of failure is not merely death, but the eternal fragmentation of the self. The weight of past traumas, once buried deep within the recesses of my mind, now resurfaced with relentless ferocity. Each memory, a shard of glass piercing the veil of my sanity, threatened to shatter the fragile construct of my new identity. Sleep offered no respite, only a relentless barrage of nightmares where the faces of my tormentors morphed into grotesque parodies of the living. Adrift in a sea of fragmented selves, each vying for dominance, each whispering insidious doubts and fears, I teetered on the brink. But amidst the darkness, a flicker of resilience ignited. The science I held sacred offered a lifeline, a framework for understanding the chaos within. I clung to the knowledge that memory, though fallible, was not immutable. The brain, that intricate tapestry of neural pathways, possessed the capacity for healing, for rewiring itself in the face of adversity. Narrative therapy became my anchor, a means of rewriting the scripts of my past, of reclaiming agency over my own story. I would not succumb to the shadows that haunted me. I would harness the power of my mind to navigate the treacherous currents. I would seek out connections, forge alliances, and cultivate the resilience needed to withstand the storms to come. For within the depths of my fragmented self lay the potential for transformation, for the emergence of a new, stronger identity, forged in the crucible of trauma and tempered by the fires of hope. This rebirth would not be defined by vengeance alone, but by the unwavering determination to heal, to rebuild, and to create a future where the echoes of the past no longer held sway. The path ahead was fraught with peril, a labyrinth of deceit and treachery, where every shadow held a potential assassin, every whispered word a veiled threat. Yet, armed with the knowledge of what was, and fueled by the burning embers of what could be, I had to navigate this treacherous court. My mind, a battleground of ancient customs and modern ideals, would be my greatest weapon. The court, steeped in tradition, valued loyalty above all else, a concept I struggled to reconcile with the betrayal I suffered. How could one pledge fealty to a system that rewarded deceit and punished virtue? How could I reconcile the values of equality and justice that I held dear with the rigid hierarchy that dictated every aspect of life here? I had to learn to play their game, to speak their language, but never lose sight of who I was. Like newly discovered cells that held the key to recognition, I had to recognize the true faces behind the masks, the hidden agendas behind the smiles. I would use their expectations against them, feigning obedience while subtly undermining their power. The memories of my past life, once a source of torment, would now serve as a guide. The pain, the trauma, the fragmentation of my identity, all of it would be channeled into a force for change. Like narrative therapy, I would rewrite my story, reclaiming my agency, and transforming myself from a victim into a victor. I would seek solace and strength in unexpected places. Perhaps, as research suggested, even cells outside the brain could hold memory, and perhaps the very stones of this ancient palace held echoes of wisdom and resilience. I would cultivate my inner resilience, drawing upon the knowledge that even low to moderate adversity could foster strength. And I would seek out those who, like me, were marginalized and oppressed, offering them hope and forging bonds of loyalty that transcended the petty squabbles of the court. The journey would be long and arduous, fraught with setbacks and disappointments. But I would not falter, for I knew that within me lay the capacity for healing, for growth, and for the creation of a future where justice and compassion prevailed. I was no longer merely Temu and Kai, the wrong daughter. I was a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. And I would not rest until the shadows had been dispelled and the light of truth shone upon this land.